Republican Seniors of Minnesota. We bring seniors 50 plus together.
Learn about and discuss issues that are important to Minnesotans. Hear from our elected officials and experts on public policy.
Meet political candidates, elect delegates to district and state conventions, and help elect Republicans to office at all levels.
We believe in and advocate for the principles of personal responsibility, economic prosperity, peace through strong national defense,
and limited, sensible government. Republican Seniors of Minnesota, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. A special welcome to those attending via our video live stream. I'm Carol Brumwell. I'm the chair of the Republican Party of Republican Seniors of Minnesota, not the party, and I am your MC for this meeting. This meeting is being live streamed today and is also recorded by our volunteers. A few quick meeting courtesy reminders. These help others hear the meeting. Please turn off or silence your cell phones. If you're setting them to vibrate, don't put them on the table because then the whole table vibrates. Take side conversations out of the room. There's doors next to the soda machines back there in the east lobby. You can close those doors and have a side conversation if you need to. Quick side conversations in a whisper only, please. I know some of us with hearing difficulties. It's a large room, so wait for the microphone. Even if you think you have a very loud voice, it will get eaten up by the room, so wait for the microphone to be brought to you. We have 2 traveling microphones that will walk around as we ask for Q&A and also for your introductions. The area closest to the beverage station over there where we have water and coffee, the first 2 or 3 seats there are off camera. So if you are getting the microphone to make a comment as a courtesy to everyone, if you would stand up and move a little closer to the center so you can be seen as well as heard. Sound check. Is everyone able to hear me, or do we need to adjust? Okay, Sarah? Okay. If during the time you are not able to hear, please wave a hand. Mike Lehman, our past chair, is up here. He will adjust the volume as necessary. Please join me in an opening prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather for a meeting. We thank you for each and every one who is here today. Please bless our speakers this day. Help them to communicate clearly the wisdom they have to share. We pray for our candidates who are seeking government office. Keep them and their volunteers safe as they meet with and educate voters. Open the hearts and minds of voters to consider who best reflects their values. We remember, O God, September 11th, 2001. The shock and horror of that tragic day have subsided, replaced now with a longing for an innocence lost. We come remembering those who lost their lives in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. We are mindful of the sacrifice of public servants who demonstrated the greatest love of all by laying down their lives for friends. We come remembering, and we come in hope, not in ourselves, but in you. In commemorating this tragedy, we give you thanks for your presence in our time of need. Amen. We'd like to acknowledge our military and veterans and active or retired police officers and first responders. Will those people please stand to be recognized? And now will everyone please stand and join me in saying Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. If you have a brief announcement that you'd like to make, a 30-second announcement, we will have a time just before the door prize drawing. That's at the very end of the meeting for those brief announcements. You're welcome to stay in the room until noon. Then we need to be clearing out for the next group to be getting in. Seating, as you saw, is within cities today. This is an experiment. This was suggested to me the very first meeting I chaired more than a year and a half ago. And so we're trying it today. We'll also try it in October. But interested in your feedback, you can send us a message or just tell us informally, do you like it? Do you not like it? It's absolutely voluntary. If you have a bunch of friends from another city that you want to sit with, that's fine. I hope we had enough chairs at the various tables that make sense to you. Otherwise, give us some feedback on did we set out enough chairs at the tables that are labeled for your city. The board has set membership rates for next year, for 2025. We're increasing $5 a person. For the new rate is $25 for a year of membership for an individual, $40 per couple. The meeting fees will still be $5 for members, $10 for guests and visitors, non-members. We'll start collecting those $25 dues next month. And so those who are newly joining next month get the added benefit of 2 2024 meetings for their dues. So we think that's a pretty good deal for new joiners. We think that's a fair deal for existing members. We're also still tracking our progress against our goals for meeting attendance and for total membership. Our goal for total membership this year is, by year end, is 240. We're at 237, we think. So if we get 3 new joiners next month, we will have met our year end goal. Yay! And it wouldn't hurt to exceed it. We also had set a goal of having at least 120 people in the room for at least 6 meetings. We have met that, I'm very happy to say. And Chuck and do we have a count yet, Scott? Okay, they're counting. So we'll see whether we have more than 120 today. I think we do. We need some additional volunteers to help with our Republican seniors. For our meeting, especially for our meeting in October, we would like 2 to 4 more greeters at the doors to help people figure out where to go. We also are looking for some people, given the bitter political environment, unfortunately we feel we need to ask for 3 volunteers to serve as sergeant of arms, just to be prepared to keep the disruptions in the meeting minimized or eliminated. We have never, to my knowledge, had a disruption of our meeting, but we want to be prepared. And from your own home, I need 1 or 2 people who are computer savvy, who will do some lookup. We want to get the campaign address for legislative Republican candidates and existing Republican legislators. They're not allowed to accept our emails through their state email system, and we would like to make sure we have contact information for them. So that's something that we're just trying to gather that information, get it into our membership email system. So if you're willing and able to do that kind of computer work from your home, let me know and we'll get you started. MNGOP has asked for some special help this week with everyone at the state fair. They got behind on opening up the mail. So they are asking for people to just come into the office and help them slit open the envelopes and get the mail sorted. Also, we as seniors have been volunteering to assemble the PCR envelopes, the receipt envelopes that get mailed back to people who have donated. Our next date for doing that is a week from this Thursday, so that is 19th of September. I have the address information up here for both of those volunteer opportunities at the MNGOP office, and you can also go online for the mailing of the PCR information, and the link is here. I want to say a special thanks to the SD50 crew who are back there running a voter registration table. Mary Ryan, Terry Havanek, and Sarah Knapp, and there may be a couple other SD50 volunteers. This is an example of something you can do at a senior center, at a church, wherever as you talk to neighbors. It doesn't take particular special training. There are a couple key rules you need to follow as you do voter registration. These volunteers can help you get started on doing voter registration in your neighborhood. Campaigns. Early voting starts a week from Friday on September 20th. It doesn't seem possible, does it? That would be for absentee ballot, mail-in voting. Direct balloting, where you put your ballot into a tally machine, starts October 18th. And then day of election voting is November 5th. Election judges are still needed, particularly in Minneapolis, but also all over Minnesota, to go out in October in party balanced pairs, taking ballots to what they call healthcare facilities. It'd be assisted living facilities, nursing homes, hospitals, and that happens all during the month of October. So you need to, if you're willing to do that, you need to get in touch with your local election judge. It'd be your city clerk or the Hennepin County election judge office, and get trained to be designated as an election judge. All of our candidates need volunteers and funding. You don't need to live in their district to donate or volunteer for a candidate. Now, we'll hear from several Minnesota-endorsed Republican candidates. Each will have 3 minutes to speak, and our board secretary, Al Muirhoff, has his 3-minute timers here. Yes, get them out of the envelope, Al. Okay. They'll have 3 minutes to speak and then about a minute for a question and answer. So I hope you'll interact with them and let them know that they're welcome. Our first candidate to speak is Kristen Robbins. Kristen is an incumbent state representative, an assistant minority leader, and is running for re-election in District 37A. That's Western Hennepin County, Maple Grove, Medina, Corcoran, Greenfield, and Maple Plain. And you had one other city. Independence. Her website is KristenRobbinsMN.com. Kristen.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning. It is so great to be here and see all of you. I am so grateful for the Republican seniors. I am a member of the Republican seniors because I am over 50, and I also see your work in our districts all around the state, and I'm so grateful. And everything Carol said, I just want to reiterate, we need you. You can help whoever your local candidate is. They need help with thank you notes. They need help with phone calling. They need help with just getting organized and getting meetings set up to their senior centers. And the voter registration, especially at your senior centers, is so important. So please, if you could call the senior centers in your district and just say, hey, I'd like to come in and do a voter registration drive. They would love it. All the activities directors at any senior living facility in your district are looking for people to host a meeting, to come and talk to the residents. So please put that on your list to do this fall. That will make a huge difference in our district. So I'm just going to talk quickly. I handed these out. I know people were saying, you don't live in my district, but this is some good talking points that you can use wherever you live. So the biggest thing that we are fighting for this year when I'm at the doors is people say they are fed up. They are fed up with the Democrat full control of state government. That's the number one issue. We need to bring balance to state government. The Democrats with full control grew the government by 40%. In my first term, it grew 7%. In my second term, it grew 11%. In my third term, when they had full control, 40% in 2 years. It is completely irresponsible and unsustainable. They spent the entire $17.5 billion surplus, and they raised taxes on us another $11 billion. We went from a huge surplus to looking at deficits in the coming forecast. So we really need to restore fiscal responsibility at the state. And if Republicans win the House, we can be the backstop that says no to all their ridiculous spending and extreme policy proposals on the social side. If we do not win this year and they keep control of state government for 2 years, they will be emboldened. And they will do the things they didn't put on the agenda this last year. The sanctuary state bill, making the entire state a sanctuary state. The ERA bill, which puts abortion rights and transgender rights in the state constitution. We got them to take that vote down, but it was a 3-day battle on the House floor. And so we have to get control of the House. We only need to flip 4 seats so that we can be the backstop until the governor and the Senate are up next time. So thank you. I appreciate all you guys are doing. Let me know if you have any questions.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kristen. Next, we'll hear from Wendy Russo, who is candidate for State Representative, Minnesota House in 49B in Eden Prairie. Welcome, Wendy. Wendy's website is www.russo4mn.com. Welcome, Wendy.
Hello, everyone. Kristen's actually one of my mentors because I am brand new to the political realm. I've never been involved in politics before, and I just want to tell you what I've learned is, first of all, there is so much work to be done, but it requires all of us to be involved, so I appreciate you all for being here and giving your time and helping out in your local community. One of the key things that I've noticed at the doors is the seniors are the only ones with common sense. They have the hindsight of what it used to be and what it is now. When I meet the young people, they have no idea. There's no other barometer to measure on, and it's frightening to me. I'm frightened for when the baby boomer generation moves on and that there will not be that legacy of people who understand what this country stands for, what Minnesota used to be, how affordable things used to be. It doesn't have to be this way. Now, I want to give you a little bit of hope, because one thing that I've seen is I've had more small donors and more small donations from individuals. I have no PAC money coming in. Nobody thinks I can win my race. And guess what? The people say otherwise, because the residents of Eden Prairie are donating to my campaign on a daily basis. They believe that we can flip Eden Prairie and the House, and they're with me. And I just want to let you know that those small donations, no matter how small they are, they do matter. First of all, it lifts my spirits. It makes me realize I'm not alone in this. And it also lets me know I have like-minded people in my community. And that's really important. And I want to thank all of you for donating to your local candidates. That's so key and crucial. The other thing is God brings in volunteers into my fold. I really had absolutely no idea what to do to run a campaign. And the only reason that I actually entered into this race is because I wanted to volunteer. I saw that things were bad and they were going to get worse if someone didn't get involved. So I just volunteered. But I volunteered to be a delegate and to volunteer until I realized there was no one running in my district. And I thought, uh-oh, we can't let that happen. At least we need to be the pushback, right? So that's what I'm here, is to help not only other people who are like-minded, but also those independents are also feeling the squeeze of finances. They also see that our laws are extreme. We're no longer in the center. The center is way over here. So I think that we're winning over that middle vote, and I've had a lot of seniors who are soft Democrats, supposedly, according to my Advantage app, tell me, where is common sense? And I want to let you know that common sense is arriving, and I want to thank you all for your time today. Thank you.
Are there questions for Wendy? We have a question here for you, Wendy.
Yes, my question is, what is the status or the reaction of the Somali community in your town?
Wendy?
Yes, thank you. You know, I've actually tried connecting with Somalian citizens in my area. I've created a flyer that's translated into Somalian. The headline is Vote Your Values. I'm really going to be appealing to their conservative values, and I have a team that's working with me on doing mailings to the apartments, because most of them are actually in the apartment buildings. It's very hard to get in there. And so we're working on that. But from individuals who are not in my area, I've talked to other Somalians, and they do feel that we're much more alike. The Republican conservative movement is exactly their mindset. So I'm hoping to sway particularly the women in my direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And we'll hear from a third candidate, Dale Johnson from Bloomington. Dale?
That's me.
That's him. He is running for the east side of Bloomington, 51B. And Dale, do you have a website yet?
Yes.
Okay, you can announce it.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, my name is Dale Johnson. Lion because I spent many years in the Lions International Volunteer Organization. And people forget Dale Johnson, but they don't forget Dale. And that will the way my name will be on the ballot is Dale Johnson. My website is liondale4mn.com. I also have cards today that I will hand out if you want them. There's a QR code on there. I did an interview with the Republican Roundtable a week and a half ago. They asked me questions. Who am I? Why am I in this? What am I doing? It's a great 18 minutes. It'll tell you more about me than I'm going to get to do in 3 minutes here. I am a senior. I live on Social Security. So I might be relatable to some of you people in here. All right? I'm not sitting on a barrel of money, so this is all tough for me. But I got in because the insanity over in St. Paul, where they can't spend money fast enough and they can't give it away to enough special interests. I'm none of those. They also are attacking seniors. The protections for seniors has been kind of erased out of some of the legislation. So if you don't get up and get active, we lose. I could say it really nice and soft, but we lost 2 state offices in the last statewide election because people took ballots and never mailed them in. These are people who are Republicans. They didn't take the time. You're not engaged. Maybe all of you are, but as a party, we're not. The Democrats are engaged. They've got every little tiny special interest all excited and jacked up. So they get all the money. We do need, like Kristen said, to flip the House. All we need is 4 seats. All right? I'm one of those people, and so is Bob Gust, who's here. He's the other half of Bloomington. He's the west half. I'm the east half. I am still a member of 2 unions, and I've been a member of 4. We need to get some common sense back into St. Paul, where they're spending our money like water. My main thing is accountability. Nobody's being held accountable for that $500 million in fraud. Nobody's accountable for our students' grades going down. So if you want to meet with me after, I would love to talk with you, and I will come to your home and meet with you and your neighbors. What I need is volunteers to spread the word, to talk to other people, and to get off the couch, skip a round of golf, don't go to the cabin, spend that time helping the Republicans win this fall. I have a card with a QR code. If you scan that, it'll take you to the Rumble site where that interview is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dale. Lion, Dale, Lion. And are there questions for Dale? Seeing none, I thank you.
I must have done a great job.
You must have done a great job. Thank you very much. Our final candidate speaker today is Bob Gust. He is the candidate for state representative in Minnesota House 50B, that's Western Bloomington, and Bob's website is gust4house.com. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Carol. Just first of all, my website is actually bobgust.com. I wasn't clever enough to come up with Gust and the number 4, so that's okay. So anyway, my district is West Bloomington, so it's pretty much Penn Avenue all the way to 169. There's a little bit of a few jogs on either end, but it's pretty much that. Pretty much goes from 494 all the way down to the river. And so as of next month, I will have been a lawyer for 40 years. And as a lawyer, I went to law school, and one of the things that I liked about law school is they teach with what's called the Socratic method, which means instead of the students asking questions, the professor asks questions. And that's sort of been the theme of my campaign. And I'm not going to call on anybody, but I want you to ask yourself, do you think your current legislature represents your interests? And I think that answer is pretty obvious. I mean, did you think the most important thing for them to do in the last, when they took control of both houses, was driver's license for non-citizens? No. Did you think that, voting rights for felons was the most important thing? Again, no. And so, unfortunately, when you're the last person to speak, it means everyone's already said what you were going to say. But I think you all sort of know what we're all talking about anyway in terms of what's gone wrong with the government. I want to say I've been a lifelong Republican. I'm proud to be a Republican. But I'm finding that, I'm glad to speak in front of this crowd because I'm finding a lot of Republicans are a little bit ambivalent. They're not motivated, and that really troubles me. For starters, some of them think like, the Republican Party is in disarray because we had kind of a fight over who's going to be in the House of the Speaker of the House on the federal level. And to them I say, well, what do you want us to be, like the Democrats and just do whatever top brass tells us? Or should we actually have people who think independently and try to advance the interests of their own constituents? I think that answer is obvious. And there's another question, and again, this isn't the crowd that I feel like I need to preach to, because you're proud to call yourselves Republicans, that's why you're here. But I also had this question starting out in the campaign. Well, what are you going to do about Donald Trump? Is you going to support Donald Trump? You got to not support Donald Trump. And so, to me, it's a very easy answer. There's not a single policy of Donald Trump that I ever disagreed with. And I think if most people think about it, what policy did you disagree with? Now, there's another thing. People talk about his style, and I have no inside information other than I know that when he decided to run, he deliberately adopted a very brash style because he saw it work for Jesse Ventura. And so some people don't like that brash style, but some people do. That's why he's got the number of people who show up at his events. And so whether you like him or not, I don't know of anyone who doesn't like his policies. And I want to be the one who gets up and says it. I was at the meeting last month, and somebody actually broke the Reagan 11th commandment by saying he was his own worst enemy. Donald Trump was his own worst enemy. And in reality, I don't think a man that successful ever does anything without deep consideration. And so you like him, you don't like him, but I really think we need to stand up for him a little bit more rather than take the position like, oh, yeah, he's this or he's that. So, Al, you giving me the hook? Thank you. Oh, I'm Bob Gus. I want your vote, your support.
1 minute for questions. Other questions? What's the website again?
BobGust.com. BOBGUST.
This question over here.
Yes, Mr.
Bob, even if people can't vote for you, can they give you money so that you can help win against the Democrats? Because the Democrats are outfunding us all the time.
What an excellent question. Yeah, the truth of the matter is almost all of my money has come from people outside of my district, or at least who can't vote for me. Some people are within my district, but it's no longer their residence. And that's a little bit of what I'm talking about. There seems to be sort of an apathy among Republicans. I heard today the fifth person I know who was the only person who signed up to run as a Republican. That's what Dale, that's what I did, that's what Kim in St. Louis Park. So Republicans are just not getting out the way they used to. Anyone else?
Is there another one? Okay. Thank you, Bob, and I apologize for mislabeling your website. It is bobgust.com. And now our featured speaker, Mark Haveman. Mark, where are you? Present. Okay, just making sure I had you spotted. Mark Haveman is an executive director of the Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence. It's an independent, nonpartisan research and education organization supporting sound tax policy and fiscally responsible government. He joined the organization in 2002, took over the organization's leadership role in 2008. He's the author of numerous research and education publications on state and local tax policy and government finance. Mark currently serves on the advisory board of the State Tax Research Institute, supporting research and education arm of COST. Mark was a member of Governor Pawlenty's 21st Century Tax Reform Commission, has served on the Board of Trustees for Government Research Association. He's been the visiting fellow at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and has served on policy advisory boards for a wide variety of organizations. Welcome, Mark, who has a BA from Calvin College and an MBA from the University of Michigan. And Mark, let's make sure your microphone is working.
How are we doing? Everybody hear me? Thumbs up back there, please. Okay, we're all good. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for inviting me today to speak. As Carol said, we are a research and education organization, our 98th year of existence. We try to inform public policy as best we can at the state legislature, but our research and education work also tries to educate citizens in their affairs of government and try to encourage civic engagement. So this is a great way for me to get out of my chair and actually do a side of my job that I really enjoy. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. What I want to do today is revisit the events and outcomes of the 2023 legislative session, but look at things through a slightly different lens than is usually talked about, and that lens being principles of good public finance and responsible, fiscally responsible fiscal sustainability of government in Minnesota. What I'll do is use a little bit of historical context to sort of set the table, and then talk a little bit about what is different this time. Now, as you all know, you're all familiar with the activities that took place and the outcomes and the policies that were enacted. That has been described as transformational, and that adjective certainly does apply. It has been described as generational, and that adjective certainly applies. We haven't seen anything like what we have put in place in over 50 years. I would like to add one additional adjective today. It's experimental. And it's experimental from the standpoint of public finance and fiscal responsibility in the state of Minnesota. So just first of all, set the landscape for my discussion today. I want to take a look back. Here's some of the primary features of budget deliberations entering the session. Obviously, we had a governor's budget proposing spending growth of over 35%. We had a lot of public concerns about equity and education finance and support for local governments. A lot of taxpayer frustration regarding their property tax burdens. A lot of discussion about the tax proposals that were being put in place and their dangers to the economy. And, of course, we had this single-party control of both legislative bodies. 70-64 in the House, 34-33 in the Senate. Now here's something interesting. What I just described is May of 1971. That was the year of the venerated and iconic Minnesota Miracle. How many people are familiar with the phrase Minnesota Miracle? It was one of the fundamental transformations of state finance. Before this year occurred, the Minnesota Miracle, property taxes were the primary source of government finance in the state. The state finances were actually almost an afterthought. And what happened was a significant transformation of responsibilities from the local level to the state level. Now, I got to admit, I cheated a little bit here. It was not a trifecta. We had Wendy Anderson, who was DFL. And 34-33 was actually 33-33-1 because an independent from Duluth was caucusing with the Republicans. But this was just too doggone interesting not to bring up today. So let's take a look and compare what took place last year versus the Minnesota Miracle of 1971. It's been called Miracle 2.0, and that's what I'm going to be referring it to the course of this presentation. And as I suggest on top, from the standpoint of scale, everything there is in constant $20-23 to make a apples-to-apples comparison between the two. Some of the numbers, by the way, I say are going to be a little bit different from what Representative Robbins has presented to you just because of how we account for things differently, and I'll try to explain them, or if you have questions about them, I'll do my best. But the surplus entering the biennium was, in our opinion, $19 billion. The 17.5 that's in the document that was handed out, that's the official number by Minnesota Management and Budget. What that number does is indemnify existing spending from inflation. And so, in actuality, we had $19 billion available to spend or do whatever we want to with, including accounting for inflation in any way that legislators would want to do. So we believe that $19 billion is a better representation of what our situation was going into the 2023 session. You see there's a percent of general fund budget. That was the function of a lot of rollovers, a lot of divided government where people just our lawmakers couldn't come to conclusion on some things, and so these extraordinary tax collections we were getting, including through the COVID economy, kept rolling over, resulting in a significant surplus of 36.7% of the state general fund budget. Spending growth on biennium about 3 times what it was in 1971. Spending growth per capita, you see, a little over 2 times. The only place where the Minnesota Miracle wins out, so to speak, over Miracle 2.0 is in the revenue raise. And again, this is for 24-25 biennium only. And the number that was presented earlier, about 11.5, includes out years as well. But the $4.2 billion is an interesting story here in its own right. We were transforming government through the Minnesota Miracle. But every citizen of the state participated in that transformation. We had about 10 or 11 individual income tax brackets in the state income tax at that time, from 1% all the way up to, I believe it was 15% maybe. Every one of those brackets went up. Sales taxes were increased. Gas taxes, cigarette taxes. There was not a person held harmless in their tax responsibility from Minnesota Miracle 1. Minnesota Miracle 2.0 is a different story, as we'll talk about a little bit later. And just as a note, disregarding one-time spending, general fund spending growth per capita is still about 26% later. There was a lot of one-time spending as a result of this sort of one-time largesse that existed in the general fund in 2023. But still, taking that out, it's a substantial expansion of government. So let me introduce the star of the show. This is Professor Adolf Wagner. From all sense of history reporting, he was the curmudgeon's curmudgeon. And you can tell by his photo. You need to work on it a little bit. But he was a late 19th century economist who was studying the Industrial Revolution. And he was looking at national incomes and national governance structures, and he came up came to become known as Wagner's Law, which is the law of expanding state activity. And simply, as it says up there, as income grows in a country, the share of public sector activity in the economy grows due to increasing pressure to address societal needs and welfare functions of the state. Economies become more complex, requires more administrative activity, environmental protection, housing, all those sorts of things. As the economy grows, those things also get put into the spending side of the ledger in the national government. Now, what I think is interesting here is that, as I suggest up here, we're turbocharging this at the subnational level, which is a different story, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But what's important to know, as I already referenced, is that the original miracle was primarily about redistributing responsibilities of government between state and locals, right? It wasn't about more spending per se. And that quote from Wendy Anderson in his budget address to the session that began the miracle points out that we're not increasing total spending, we're just developing a system to finance it differently. It's a different story in 2023. That quote comes from I can't remember who, but it was an individual talking about the tremendous successes of the results of the 2023 session. A remaking of local government and local economies, changing the state's relationship, and it's all very true in many ways. And here's just a sample of the types of things that were passed. The targeted redistribution of tax burden. Several people got relief, including Social Security recipients. But most of the tax relief flowed to lower income families, especially with kids. There was a concentrated effort to lower the poverty rate of children in households from down to 3%, as best that the experts could identify, with a new child tax credit, expansion of the child tax credit, but was limited to certain income thresholds. The new state insurance program for paid and family medical leave. This was funded the first couple of years by the general fund, but a new payroll tax on employers and employees is going to be kicking in January of 2026, I believe, to fund this on an ongoing basis. School meals, tuition, sick leave, the list goes on. State invested a five-fold amount in housing-related initiatives in the last biennium. First ever unemployment benefits to hourly school workers, something that no other state does. Expansion of PELRA, that's the Public Labor Relations Act. This gets more inside baseball stuff, but it addresses the terms and conditions of employment of public sector employees. Wide variety of new business regulations. As a matter of fact, a senior lobbyist told me that he predicted that 10 years from now, the regulations will be remembered more than the spending that occurred in the 2023 session. And there's more to come. As Representative Robbins suggested, there were proposals for a public health care option introduced this session. It was meant to be the second year of a biennial budget. Is typically meant to sort of adjust things and do bonding. And so the public health care option really had no chance to pass this year, but the landscape has been laid for that. And a basic income pilot program is also likely to be introduced in 2026. Right now it's for $100 million statewide, and again, there's nothing like it. And that idea, nothing like it in the state, is repeated over and over again. I think what makes our Miracle 2.0 so unique, it's not just we're doing these things. And I would argue many of these things are very legitimate things to explore and potentially adopt as part of public policy in the state. In no way am I saying these things shouldn't exist. I'm just saying that they should be paid for responsibly, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But one of the primary themes that over and over again, if you heard legislative debates on these issues is that we're not just doing this, we're going to do them bigger and better than anybody else. And you can go right down the line. There are I want to say a dozen states that have a state insurance program for paid family and medical leave. But ours is more accessible to a broader definitions of family and people covered by this, as well as the generosity is greater. As I mentioned, the uninsurance program for school workers during summer, nothing like it anywhere in the United States. Several of the new business regulations are breaking new ground in workplace and workforce issues. The basic income pilot program, $100 million statewide. These things have been done at the local level, including Minneapolis, including St. Paul, including some other places with COVID money. This is something completely different at the state level. So the result, I would argue, is a high wire act of fiscal responsibility. First of all, we have a forecasted structural imbalance right now heading into it's projected into the 26-27 legislative session or fiscal year 26-27 budget based on the current forecast. That may change in November. And it doesn't mean that we're looking at a deficit per se, because we still have rollover cash that hasn't been used as a result of collections continuing to exceed expectations at the state level. And we have a absolutely topped-off reserve of over $3 billion. But when you look at it from the standpoint of biennial budget, when you look at current revenues subtracting current spending projected into 26-27, which is what the legislative bodies are going to be debating and discussing and building in the next legislative session, without inflation, $727 million deficit. With inflation, $1.572 billion. Income tax dependency. It's never been higher and never been more reliant on volatile income streams. How many of you remember Governor Dayton's tax proposal in his first term and the balanced stool? Does anybody remember that? Raise your hand if you do. We have one hand here. Okay. The idea was property taxes were, again, as they always are, a problem. And his idea was to reduce that by increasing taxes on the other. He had a literal balanced stool built, or the commissioner of finance at the time. They developed an unbalanced stool where each leg, property, sales, and income, were represented. And the property tax was sticking out here, and the income and the sales tax was and it was transported all around the state. People were signing it and pledging on it and everything of that nature. Ultimately, things changed in a significant. That's what led to the fourth tier income tax. Excuse me. But today, the income tax leg is over 50%. And not only and I call it a rocking chair, because we're now dealing with far less stable sources of income than we did before. Again, wages and, yes, Social Security income are some of the most stable sources of income to tax. A lot of that has been replaced by income on investments, the most volatile, capital gains taxes, the most volatile, corporate income taxes, right up there as far as volatility is concerned as well, and higher income taxes on a more concentrated group of Minnesota citizens. I believe that the top 1% now, I'm not going to say this number because I'm not sure about this, but the top 1% pays an exceptionally large amount of individual income taxation in the state. Interestingly enough, 1 in 4 Minnesota adults, according to the Department of Revenue, pay no individual income tax. That number will increase as a result of more lower to lower middle income households are taken off the tax rolls, and as a result, and that burden is shifted onto higher income households. Elevated federal fiscal policy risks reduce federal assistance from both federal deficits and politics. I think this is an underappreciated one because about 36% of the state's total available resources come from the federal government. That's up substantially over the past 10 years. Now, MMB segregates that money, meaning it doesn't flow directly into the general fund. So theoretically, if something happens that reduces federal support for states, MMB just cuts that spending and we go on. Now, practically, with all that state activity being dependent, in to some respect, on federal sources of revenue, that competition will go into the general fund, and we will have more calls for spending, larger general fund budgets, more pursuits of dedicated revenue streams, dedicating this tax to that, which is bad public policy. And so as a result of, at some point in time, the federal government is going to have to grapple with its incredible deficit. And 17% of government spending goes to states. But if you take out things that are largely going to be untouchable, defense, Medicare, Social Security, and interest on the debt, we're almost up to 50%. Money to states is going to be affected almost by default whenever we decide to sort of take this on. Now, right now, it looks like neither candidate is ready to do something like that. The Penn-Wharton business models have come out of their proposals, and both the Trump administration proposals and the Harris administration proposals increase the federal deficit over the next 10 years, ranging from 1.2 to $5 trillion. Now, the trust funds are going in the red within 10 years. There's just a whole range of federal activities and interests in the budget. We got the expiration of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act coming up. It's a ticking debt bomb. How that's going to be handled is a big question mark and could have profound implications for what federal funds flows to the states look like after 2025. The political issues are another matter, and this relates to mostly the Trump administration. When you look at the Trump administration's budgets in his first term, every year there were major, major cuts to state-level services, from Medicaid to a variety of grants that are offered to states on a competitive basis. Significant trillions of dollars in potential cuts. They never really materialized because a lot of these needed to have congressional action, and in many times, even Republicans in the Congress have to take care of their constituents back home with some of these programs. But there's a clear interest, as you may have picked up, to consolidate more authority and power over federal funds flows and the budget in the Trump administration. And unknown to a lot of people, the executive branch actually has a lot of ability to manipulate federal funds flows post-appropriations of Congress. If you look on our website, it's the first feature article that's there. You might be interested in learning more about this. But anyway, that threat exists, and that potential exists, at least. So it's important to understand, behind the scenes, we may not have the most reliable federal partner. Now, debt-enabled support for state governments is not likely to sort of immediately have the tap turned off on it, but that potential exists going forward. And a lot of what we put in place in the state in 2023 is extremely difficult, if not politically impossible, to wind down. Once you provide these child tax credits and all the other programs and initiatives that build up the interests and support, these things are very difficult to unwind. I should mention, because it's an issue that comes up a lot, the issue of state migration and the dangers of people leaving the state of Minnesota. Just to give you a sense, every few years we do an individual income tax comparison study, an effective tax rate study, where we actually model tax returns across the country for, I believe it's like 4 filer types at about 9, 10 different income levels. So it's like literally thousands of modeled tax returns. And then compare them to see what the tax burdens are for where you can compare Minnesota to other states in terms of what these tax burdens are. Well, it also allows us to say, well, how many of these people do you need to support these people leaving? And this is from the last one. This is from 2018, before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, because it was dealing with a prior tax year. It took 100,000 adjusted gross income married filing joint filers to replace just 1 millionaire leaving the state. That number is going to go up as a result of the policies enacted in 2023. Now, what was interesting to us, and we only go back about 7 years on this because we only started looking about 7 years, but this was really surprising to us. Minnesota does a actually remarkably decent job of holding on to their higher income filers. What we did was look at statistics of income data from the IRS, and unfortunately, they stop at 200,000 because I think if the number was a little higher, you'd maybe start to see more migration or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. But consistently, Minnesota hangs on to these people as a relative share of the number of that people existing in the state at like the $200,000 level and above. We hang on to them. We're like 42nd in the nation losing them. Big difference on the other side. We do a terrible job of attracting these people into the state. In the most recent year, we were 49th in the nation in the 200K filers. And people, again, relative to the base that's here, 49th in the nation. 100 to 200K filers, dead last. California beats us. And this, of course, has profound implications in, to coin the famous Clinton phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." We have a tendency to say in that shop, it's the in-migration, stupid. Because we're talking about workforce issues. We're talking about the replacement of people that are essential to the growth and success of the Minnesota economy. This is not rich. The median household income for married filing joint, I believe, is well over $100,000 now in the state of Minnesota. Two income families of $60,000 apiece, you're already there. So this is middle income, and it's something we're watching very closely. The other caveat I want to throw on this is that this is tax year 2022, and we have not seen the implications of tax year 2023, which is when all this hits. So we're going to be watching next year's SOI returns really, really closely. So what is the experiment? Public finance theory says some obligations are best left to the federal government for a couple of reasons. One, they don't have a balanced budget requirement. And two, they don't have border effects. It's much easier for us to move from Minnesota to Wisconsin than it is for us to move to Costa Rica, right? And typically, those things are a lot of the things, the Wagnerian initiatives that we talked about earlier. If you listen to the discussion of, for example, the paid family leave program, right? What you heard every year, or what you heard all the time was, we are the only country major developed country in the world that doesn't have that? Well, the operative word is country there, because this is an extraordinary obligation, potential obligation you're investing in. It doesn't mean you can't, but it means you need to recognize it. And you need to recognize the potential within the framework and context of a balanced budget requirement and the existing levels of taxation in the state. Now, Minnesota has struggled mightily, and I capitalize that, to keep up with the objectives of the old miracle. And there's no better example than this than, anybody want to guess? Local government aid. How many of here have heard the factoid that local government aid really hasn't increased in over 20 years? Raise your hand. Yeah. And that's true, right? It was $564 million, I believe, in 2023, and only last year did we bump it up above that level and bring it up in the $600 million range and change. But what's not recognized is that that's not an accident. The state has its own obligations that they took over. Education, healthcare, all those sorts of things. They will crowd out that. And it has happened time and time and time again over the course of those 20 years, where when we do get into a budget crisis or circumstances, the first thing that is cut, the first thing that is addressed is local government aid, general purpose local government aid to counties and cities, because it's ultimately their responsibility to do this. Now, just another little factoid about LGA, which is something we study very closely. I think you'll find this interesting. There's a, and there will be, again, it happens every year. There's a proposal to create an automatic inflator on LGA and county aid, general purpose county aid as well, to at least keep that level up with inflation going forward. The amount of money, the appropriation adjusted for inflation going forward. We looked at the past 20 years of that and simulated if we had adjusted LGA to the inflation rate over those past 20 years and compared it to what we did spend, it's about $7 billion more in LGA would have gone out to cities over that 20-year period. That $7 billion paid for every cent of homeowner refunds and special property tax refunds in the state of Minnesota. These things have an extraordinary, these minor things that just sound so simple have extraordinary opportunity costs for other areas of states, for other programs within the state. And it's important to recognize that it's just inflation. Well, that commits money to something and ties the hands of legislators from putting resources into place based on need and priority as they see fit, which is like the foundation of public finance. So anytime you hear adjust for inflation, with the exception of taxes themselves, because that's a very legitimate thing to do, whenever you hear about spending adjusted for inflation or making sure that this spending is always adjusted for inflation, keep that in mind. So we have a difficult time keeping up with the initiatives of 2.0. And so the question remains, is this a model for other states to follow, or a economically costly thing, or maybe something in between? It's an experiment. We're in the second inning of something very significant here. And again, I want to emphasize that the portfolio of things that we're invested in may make sense. Other states do it. It may be good public policy. And that is what elections are about. And that's what decision-making is about. Prioritizing things that matter the most, identifying those things, and providing necessary funding to get them accomplished. And it may be that many of those items that you saw there are good for the state of Minnesota. I'm not arguing they're not. But it's important to finance them responsibly. And as I said, we are embarking on a significant experiment in a state that already has appreciably higher taxes than other states and has an interest in doing more than other states do with these sorts of things, whether or not, and I should say, operating under a balanced budget requirement, whether or not we have the capacity to see this experiment through its end. So thank you. I appreciate the time. Any questions? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In the rugby shirt. Oh, yeah. Okay. What's that? Oh, only when we have a deficit.
No, I can. Hello, tech. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Mark, first of all, thank you very much for your comments. Very interesting. A lot of detail, but very interesting. I just read a report, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about a brain drain that was just listed here recently. That's young people aged 25 to, I think, 40 or 45, leaving the state. And they listed the 3 states, I think California, New York, and Illinois were the highest in that survey, and I believe Minnesota was in there in the top 10, and simply because of high taxes and high costs on everyday things like food and gasoline and so on, and finally crime. Have you seen that? I know you touched on it very well. Any comments on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, when we did a migration report that I can send, I assume I can send a link to somebody, then I can pass that on to you. We looked at that as well, because there was some discussion about it. It was prompted by a Star Tribune article basically saying the same thing, that we're having a brain drain of young people in the prime early workforce areas leaving the state. What was interesting to us in looking at that was it sort of begs the question, okay, they may leave the state for going to college and early on in their career, but where do they wind up, right? And interestingly enough, a brilliant study was done by some professors, I can't remember where, looked at this issue to try to identify where these people actually finally wind up. And they used LinkedIn, of all places, to sort of track these individuals that covered an amazing amount of higher education institutions across the country. And it turns out Minnesota actually does a pretty good job of having them wind up here after they leave. They come back to live. And the other interesting thing about migration is that when I mentioned earlier that Minnesota hangs on to their higher income people fairly well, it may not be a policy thing. It might be a cultural thing, because the Midwest, generally speaking, holds on to people very well. There's like a strong roots or something like that, because we were 42nd, but every border state to us was even higher than ranked even lower on that sort of migration. So we hang on, in the Midwest, we seem to hang on to people more. It's interesting to sort of look at and think about. I'll get right back to you here.
Mark, Don Patton.
Yo, hi, Don.
One of the things I think that helps Minnesota, and you didn't really address it in your comments, but we have a lot of corporate headquarters here. Best Buy, Toro, Cargill, 3M, Medtronic, although I think Medtronic moved its headquarters to Ireland to get away from the taxes. But the business climate by the state in retaining entities that hire high-paying incomes. Most of those corporate, they're not low-wage. Could you comment on that?
Sure. A lot of things to mention there. First of all, I think it's important to understand that we now have the highest corporate income tax rate in the country at 9.8%. No less importantly, we are almost certainly, I don't have the evidence for it, but everything points to it, the broadest corporate income tax base in the country. And that includes, as a result of the 2023 recession, taxation of global intangible low tax income. Do not get me going on that, please. But it's basically a form of taxation of foreign earnings. We tax that at 50%. That's the highest in the nation. To give some sense of perspective, New York taxes it, Boston taxes it at 5%. In addition, we have something called, and I'm sorry to get technical on here, the dividend received deduction. It's basically lower taxation for dividends from domestic and foreign subsidiaries. We are also including in our dividend received deduction foreign dividend, and I believe we're the only state, maybe there's one other state, that taxes both GILTI and foreign dividends at the same time. So, first of all, the corporate tax situation is, from the objectively, a significant issue in the state. Now, the one thing that is beneficial to us, at least from the standpoint of large multinational companies, and again, I'm sorry to get technical on you on this, is something called single sales apportionment. And basically what that means is that every multinational company, multi-state company, has to figure out a way, has to apportion its profits to the various places, states around the country in an appropriate way. For a very long time, it was done on a third basis. A third property, a third people, labor, and a third based on sales. Several years ago, we went to single sales factor apportionment, meaning we only tax corporate income based on the relative share of sales that exists in the state of Minnesota. So when you think about it from the standpoint of encouraging capital formation, investment, things of that nature, it really is kind of a wash, because you're really just taxing them based on what they sell, what ends up being sold here in the state, rather than what, how many people you have here and how much you're building. A couple of things, though. First of all, obviously for smaller companies, and there are a lot of them. I was surprised by this because some recent statistics came out from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. There are a lot of Minnesota-only state corporations here, meaning basically all their sales are just here in the state of Minnesota, but they formed as corporations. So they're exposed to that highest 9.8% rate. And so they're probably feeling the biggest squeeze, sort of the smaller C corps in the state of Minnesota. And the other thing is that there is some interest, at least by one person, a very influential person, the tax chair of the Minnesota House, to revisit the idea of three-factor apportionment. And that would likely bring out the torches and pitchforks for a lot of folks here in the state if that actually started to get any traction. But so I think the moral of the story is the 9.8%, at least from the standpoint of some of our biggest employers and the potential interest of others coming to the state, is more of a intangible, bad appearance type of thing, just because of the single sales factor apportionment. But clearly, there's a lot of concern about foreign earnings and continued efforts to expand on that. There's something called worldwide combined reporting, which is you'll see in the newspaper probably in a couple of months as it raises its head again, which again we would be one, if not, well, the only state in the nation to adopt that independently as a requirement. There's, and I think also from the individual income tax standpoint as well, businesses compete for labor, and if you can find equivalent labor at lower cost, you're going to do it. And creating parity across states based on our higher income taxes, individual income taxes may mean we need to create a wage premium to get these people here as well, which also might be a disincentive. So, yeah.
Hi, my name. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Sam Albert. You mentioned the issue of corporate taxes being high. I've always looked at, or not always, but for many years, looked at corporate taxes as sort of a gimmick that government uses to collect more revenue without directly coming to us, the consumer or the employee. I was just curious if your opinion about what happens to corporate taxes. How does it trickle down? Because a lot of it has to be paid for by the consumer. It's an expense just like paying an employee. And if government mandates a higher minimum wage or even what they call a living wage, that has to be paid by the business owners, and somehow that trickles down to us, but also to shareholders and so forth. So I was just wondering, have you been sort of suspicious about this whole issue of corporate taxing? Because I can picture a world where you don't tax corporations and it doesn't really hurt anything because you substitute it, some other tax for it. And just a chance for you to challenge what I just said, or
no,
whatever.
I won't challenge it a bit. That's a time-tested truth of taxation. It's called tax incidence, and I'm actually pleased to tell you that a couple of things. One, we have one of the finest, in my opinion, departments of revenue in the nation. And an example of that is our Minnesota tax incidence study. It's available on their website, and it talks specifically about this. So you can go and sort of see what their best analysts have calculated as far as the pass-through. But you're absolutely right. It goes to people, and it goes to labor, and it goes to potentially higher prices as well. And they segregate as best they can, based on good economic modeling and theory, what shares go to those three things. You get a sense of where the final resting place of corporate income taxes lie. And that applies to all business taxes, right? As a matter of fact, an organization I work with, the Council on State Taxation in Washington, D.C., published a very interesting report on business tax fairness. And it's another link I can pass along to you, although it's highly technical. It comes from state tax notes, so I'll try to give you the Cliff's Notes version of this. It was prompted by the idea that Minnesota businesses businesses in general aren't paying their fair share. And so they said, well, and it's based on the idea that the corporate income tax is, for lack of a better way to describe it, perverted by a wide variety of tax expenditures, aka loopholes, things of that nature, and we're not collecting what we should theoretically out of a corporate income tax based on a idea of responsible, principled tax policy. Well, the cost people said, okay, let's take that same argument and apply it to property taxes and sales taxes and see what happens. And Minnesota's classification system, taxes on equivalent value, a dollar of value, about 80% more than homesteads in the state. And as far as instances concerned, business inputs, purchases of inputs into manufacturing. Now, we do a lot of exemption for that for property tax. Minnesota does a great job of exempting personal property out of like manufacturing operations and stuff like that. But there are all sorts of other things that businesses purchase that wind up in the price that you folks pay. And so all of these sorts of issues are not just corporate income taxes, but all taxes need to be thought about that way from the standpoint of business and business incidents. Yeah.
There is a constitutional amendment on our ballot this fall that is about the proceeds from the lottery and designating that for the next 25 years, the proceeds from the lottery will be single designated. You mentioned something about be suspicious when things are earmarked and that they don't go through the legislature. Yeah. Could you comment on that constitutional amendment?
Yeah. generally speaking, we're not in favor of dedicated revenues. Our organization is based on the belief that resources need to be allocated on the basis of need and priority, and that's the job of the legislator to do that, not put it on a constitutional amendment and redirect things in a certain way. And there are always more proposals for that. As a matter of fact, even Republicans, it's a bipartisan interest when your program that you feel strongly about is not being supported in the way you should. You want to dedicate revenue to it. So this is completely bipartisan. But as a general rule of thumb, I would much prefer that to go into the general fund. But politically, it ain't going to happen ever. I mean, that's going to pass because it's just incredibly popular. And we do have a arguably greater set of needs to take care of with respect to our natural and cultural amenities here in the state of Minnesota. Now, what it all goes to and so forth like that, we can have all sorts of debates about whether it's going to the right place within that sphere of activity. But as far as general dedication as an idea, it's not a good idea.
Hi, Ed Pung from Lakeville, Minnesota. I have a question. I don't know how much insight or how much of an impact what Kamala Harris has just recently proposed. One of her few things that she said is increasing corporate capital gains from 20 to 28%, I do believe, and then also unrealized capital gains and how that would impact the average person.
Yeah, I believe she was talking about the corporate income tax rate, which was lowered under the TCGA from 32% down to 21%, and now she wants to bring it back up a little, whatever that percentage is, back up to 28, but not up to where it was before. As for the capital gain, I haven't really looked into that closely in terms of its implications. I stick more with the state level tax policies, and to the extent that federal tax policy influences state tax policy, I'm a student of, but I'm sure there's something out there that has something to say about that.
Yeah, Al Muirhoff. I was just wondering, they talk about the rainy day fund. I've never seen them use it. I'm wondering if that's something that's very likely to be triggered in the near future as we get less of this money from the federal government. And are there only specific ways they can do that?
Yeah. Minnesota actually does a really responsible job of establishing a budget reserve. The way MMB does it is statistically designed so that it can withstand, I think, 95% of historical average recessions. I am simplifying that hugely, so just so you all recognize that. But it's a careful, thoughtful way to establish a budget reserve, and we do a good job of making sure that budget reserve is always topped off with need, because if later this year, as a matter of fact, MMB will be recalculating the reserve requirements based on what we did in 2023 and likely elevating that reserve number again to sort of make sure that threshold is met. With regards to the federal funds flows, I think the odds of it happening anytime soon are remote, just because people don't take this seriously, it seems like, unless a crisis actually materializes. So I think that threat is there. With respect to tapping the reserves, we're going to know a lot more in the November forecast, because that's when MMB comes out with their projections of revenues for the forthcoming fiscal year 26-27 biennium, and we'll see if that structural deficit or that structural imbalance, still exists, if it's expanded, if it's contracted, if it doesn't exist anymore. And that'll give us a sense of what the landscape is going to look like for the 2026-2025 session. And then in February, of course, is when MMB does the official, here's what you have, here's what we expect, here's what you work with. And we'll see. I haven't been... Right now, at least, there doesn't seem to be any particular signs of major recession looming. I've seen a couple of investment houses retracting their recession projections for the near future. Saw some articles about that, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Hi, my name is Al Stern. I have a question about efficiency of our spending. A big part of our budget is for education. In St. Paul, for example, fewer than 5% of the kids are at grade level in math and reading levels. Is there any effort to really get a better bang for our buck?
Well, I can't, even though my wife's a teacher, and I sleep on the couch if I don't do things right. But I have, they are extremely challenged for a whole variety of reasons. As far as the budget is concerned, and I lost my thought. Oh, efficiency. That's right. I think the big thing that the state could do is to have the legislature stop trying to be a state school board and parcel out funds for this, funds for that, funds for this program, that program, and 50 million here, 100 million here, whatever the case may be, and just think more about providing basic education support at a level like a general purpose grant that allows district superintendents and their boards to allocate more money based on what they think is needed in their district. And that was one of the chief concerns of Republicans in the last legislative session. We did increase basic education aid substantially, arguably, but there was also a lot of money was designed for particular types of programs and initiatives, I've spoken with a couple of folks in the one of our members, as a matter of fact, is a association director of schools, and I said it'd be so much easier if they just trusted us to give us money and allocate it based on what the needs of our district is. So I think that alone would help with respect to efficiency in school spending.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
I expect that Mark will be able to stay around for after the meeting questions. I know that we may have missed one or two, but I appreciate all the interest that has been expressed here today. That was a terrific, detailed speech. He mentioned sending us links to a couple studies. We will include those in the meeting minutes. The video of this meeting will be available in about 4 days, and you can come back and zoom in on the slides if for some reason you didn't catch something that you were particularly interested in. You will be able to see that in a little few days. Our next meeting is October 8th. Our featured speaker will be Brian Peters. He's the Executive Director of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. He'll tell us about the current state of law enforcement in Minnesota. We'll also hear from some endorsed candidates for Minnesota House and one who is running for the Three Rivers Park Board. It has been suggested that we do this seating by city. We will run this experiment a second month in October and look forward to getting your feedback. Was it helpful to be able to see who else is in your neighborhood? And then we'll talk about whether we do it in November as well. Also, in October, we plan to have a book exchange table. So we distributed our standing library last year, similar to how we handled that. If you have conservative books or interesting Republican books you would like to donate on to someone else, bring them. Chuck has agreed to organize that table, and we'll handle a donation of any that remain after our November meeting. Again, we will be collecting our 2025 dues starting next month, so we'll be collecting those in October, November. Are there any first-time guests or visitors who would like to introduce themselves? There's one back here.
I'm Mary Eckenberger. I live on Sheridan Avenue. I love Minnesota.
Thank you, Mary. Welcome. Other first-time guests or visitors back here?
Good morning. My name is Adam Veerhoff. I'm with the Turning Point USA High School Field Program. So kind of my whole job is to help the younger age high school students start Turning Point chapters at their high school. If you're not familiar with Turning Point, it's just kind of a very generic pro-America nonprofit organization. We promote values like limited government, pro-market, pro-open market capitalism, those kind of things we all used to be able to agree upon. So it's my hope to get a chapter at every high school in the state. That might be a little bit of a big goal. If you know any teachers, parents, students, anybody who might be interested in bringing a more conservative type group to their school, they can go to Turning Point's website, fill in their information. It'll bring it right to me if they select that they're in Minnesota. And then I reach out to them and we'll conduct like a little phone interview meeting, and I'll help them start to recruit and start to get that organized at their school. So if anybody knows anybody, definitely have them reach out. I'd love to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam Veerhoff. And Adam, you're based in St. Cloud right now. Is that correct? Yeah. So find Adam after the meeting if you have a high school interested in that. Are there other guests or first-time visitors who would like to introduce yourself with name and town? Seeing none, let's move on. I encourage you to look for ways to help candidates, whether that is offering to walk with them, funding them, making sure that their volunteers have water after they've done their block walking, supporting younger parents by offering to babysit kids so the younger parents can be involved. Do what you can to help get folks active. I encourage you to sign up for newsletters from the various organizations. Each of the Senate districts, each of the congressional districts have some wonderful newsletters. In particular, CD3, CD5, City of Minneapolis have active newsletters. I have examples of them up here if you want to come take a picture of one and get yourself signed up for these. Then you'll know where candidates are. You'll know some of the issues that are more local to your area, and you'll know the names of the local candidates that you can vote for. I have some event information up here. We have debate watch parties happening tonight for the Harris-Trump debate. There's one at New Hope in the Cinema Grill. Admission is $10. That's being sponsored by CD5. There is one being sponsored by SD56 that is at Cowboy Jack's in Apple Valley. I have that flyer up here. Some local picnics are happening. We've got the one for our local Senate districts 50, 46, and 51. So that's Bloomington, Edina, Bloomington, Richfield, and St. Louis Park, and Hopkins. All of them are meeting this Friday, the 13th, and that's at Roseland Park in Edina. And I have the brochure up here if you want to come take a picture of that. Let's see, what else have we got? Center of American Experiment is holding their fundraiser September 28th, featuring Christopher Rufo. That'll be at the hotel at the MSP Airport. That's a fundraiser. That's $150 is the starting price for seats. American Majority is offering free training on the Ballot Out, Ballot In initiative to track absentee ballots to ensure that voters who request an absentee ballot actually use them. CD7 is very active in this absentee ballot trace because 46% of the precincts out there on the west coast of Minnesota are mail-in only ballots. And so they are really working hard. If you are willing to volunteer on that, this is work from home kind of stuff. If you're willing to volunteer to help track those absentee ballots, please come get the information. American Majority is actually paying people. They'd love to have you as a volunteer, but if you would like a little Christmas money, you can work for pay doing that work. Let's see. The closest trainings here are September 12th in Stillwater, September 25th in Shakopee, and October 2nd in Minneapolis. So I've got that training information up here and also the contact. Take Charge. is having their lunchtime symposium October 25th at the Valley View Country Club in Golden Valley. Kendall Qualls, who we have had speak here before, will be moderating the panel at that lunchtime discussion, and tickets are $45. Remember to tell a friend or neighbor about our organization. We have the rack card brochure and also little business cards available for you to take to remind you to tell anybody you see who's over 50. Remember, we have a fairly young definition of what senior is, and we'd be happy to have younger people here as well as anyone you can recruit. Our speakers team, Don Patton and Steve Anderson, who are at the back corner back there, are wonderful speaker recruiters. They get our featured speaker every month. They say, if you have an idea of someone who would make a good featured speaker, please see them. They are now recruiting for 2025 speakers, so we'd be happy to hear about your ideas. Again, more information about today's announcements is up here. Take your phone, take a picture of the information so it stays available for others. We will send out an announcement when the video is available. Again, that'll be probably 4 days from now, and we send out a quick email blast saying this month's meeting video is available. Now, I know that there are people who wanted to make the 30-second announcements, and Sarah was one, and the Tad Jude team was another. So, well, Sarah is right behind you. Oh, is there another one here? Okay.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah Knapp. I'm a member of Senior Republicans, and I am also co-chair with Terry Hovanek, who's in the back of Senate District 50 Republicans. One thing I want to reiterate to all of you, that one of Trump's policies is no tax on Social Security for seniors, so be sure to share that with everyone. I know it would help my parents. Secondly, we're in the back for voter registration and for absentee ballot forms as well. If you need any, stop back. We can help you with it if you need help, or you're welcome to take a copy home. And I also want to mention, if you would like a table for voter registration at your church or your community event, you feel free to contact Senate District 50. We've got Christy Lundy, Mary Ryan, and other volunteers that will we can mobilize and come to you, because voter registration is very important. Last thing, if anyone makes good chili, we are looking for entrants to our chili cook-off on September 13th. We'll be handing flyers out. All are welcome, even if you live outside the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Judy Ludolf from Bloomington. I just want to tell that on the ballot in November, there'll be ranked choice voting, and I'm voting to get rid of it. It's awfully complicated. I think people in Bloomington need to educate themselves on what ranked choice voting is.
Thank you, Judy.
Clayton Mitchell's organization, Election Integrity Solutions, they are sponsoring a nationwide effort next week on non-citizens voting. If you want to find a lot of detailed information on what non-citizen voting looks like, go to onlycitizensvotecoalition.com. And they've actually got signs, and if we do care about immigrants, the fact if they register to vote in a federal election, they can go to jail, be deported, and forever lose their chance at being a citizen. So if we care, we should fight that, and that is how they're going to win the election, is with these uncitizen voting.
Thank you. And
Hi, I'm Dennis Hogan from the Tad Jude campaign. Tad regrets not being here to our Republican seniors meeting. He has been here about 7 out of the last 9 meetings, so he regrets that. But I'd like to make a few announcements about Tad's campaign. Tad was just informed by his opponent, Kelly Morrison, that she is not going to debate him on any of these issues. Now, this is a common technique by liberal Democrats who think they have the advantage, think they have the press on their side, and her technique is because she does not want you to know. You heard all about the experiment. She was the deciding vote on amendment and bill after bill that supported the Minnesota experiment that we're talking about there, that is damaging Minnesota. And she was also the main author of the worst abortion bill, not in the country, but in the world, which allows abortion up until the 9th month. And some people, fortunately, we haven't had to try it out to see whether people that are actually born will be aborted or killed. So what we need to do is have all of you support Tad Jude as much as you can. If you live in western Hennepin County or Bloomington or Coon Rapids or Anoka, I'd like you to go up and sign up for a sign if you haven't already got one. See the orange man over there in the back? That's the guy you need to get the signs from. And come out and support Tad Jude any way you can. Write letters to the editor.
Thank you, Dennis.
I'm sorry. I just want to. Okay.
Yeah, you
had
30 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it.
Thank you. And now our prize drawing.
My husband was the finance director for the city of Minnetonka for 30 years, and he said, start local and then go up, and you always know what's going on.
Thank you so much. If your ticket ends in 0263, I have a gift card for you. 0263, are you still in the room? Okay, come on up and I'll give you your gift card. And if your ticket ends in 2901, I have a gift card for you. 2901, are you still in the room? Okay, come on up, I have a gift card for you. We'll see all of you October 8th. Thank you so much for being here.
Republican Seniors of Minnesota. For more information, please visit republicanseniorsmn.com. While visiting our website, you can click on the video tab to watch videos of past meetings. Also, look for other tabs that bring you to our live player and other special video programs. Or on YouTube, search for Republican Seniors of Minnesota.